in clip 2, it's obvious to me that the BBC is all in on the fascist takeover of Western civilization. But I think we may have known that, but it's never been so obvious. But let's play Greenwald on Cameron being hasty. In other words, jumping right away, wanting to put together these, set up a furtherance of a Patriot Act-like act in England.
Brazenness with which Western leaders like David Cameron have moved to exploit the emotions surrounding the Paris attack has really been stunning. I mean, even the Bush administration had the decency to wait a few days after the 9/11 attack before it started introducing new spying and detention legislation. And Prime Minister Cameron and others haven't even waited that long. The victims haven't even been buried, and already they're demanding more powers. I mean, if this were a reasoned debate, they would examine what happened here and commission experts to talk about any gaps, legitimate gaps, but that's not what they're doing. They want to exploit fear and exploit the emotions surrounding this event to gain still more spying powers for themselves, and I think the public will be rightly wary.
The public is not going to be rightly wary.
The public doesn't give a crap.
Who's he kidding?
Oh, man. No.
So the BBC guy comes on and he makes his commentary, which says to me that they're stooges, and this is kind of an interesting little back and forth.
But I just wonder whether it's quite difficult for you to make the argument at times like this that we need to be wary of the security authorities rather than the fanatics.
I don't think it's hard at all to make the argument. I think this is the crucial time to make the argument. I think people resent when their emotions are exploited and trifled with, and when governments try and use fear-mongering to get more powers for themselves. It's definitely an effective tactic, and that's why governments do it. But that's what has led the West to things like destroying Iraq and torturing people systematically and putting them in prisons for years without charges, is this constant fear-mongering and exploitation of emotions surrounding terrorism. And I think it's the responsibility of journalists and others to demand reasoned discourse.
Well, reasoned discourse, but you do respect the right of publics in countries where maybe they have different views to yours, and in a reasoned discourse have decided that they think they would like them to have more powers. You're almost as if you don't think the public have the right to the opposite view to you. They're perfectly entitled, aren't they, to take whatever view they want of the different risks.
Wow. Yeah. I was listening to Radio 4. All you hear on Radio 4, which is their news kind of channel, BBC, is right. Is this all in, we need to trust the government. They know what's best for us. Makes so much sense. Let them have all the powers they need. I mean, these people have spy cameras in their trash bins. I mean, come on. They love it for some reason.
Well, that's what this guy's arguing with Greenwald. He says they're and in the next clip, we can play that. It should be, I think it's pretty short.
Yeah, sure. People in democracies all the time embrace authoritarianism. There are all kinds of cases where that's the case. People have the right to want to live in an authoritarian state. They have the right to have their government monitor and spy on everybody. But at the same time, there are basic individual rights that even majorities are not permitted to infringe upon. That's why most Western countries have constitutions, and most countries around the world have subscribed to treaties. So even if 89% or 97% of the people of a population want to trample on the rights of others, they actually don't have the right to do that even in democracy. And I think mass surveillance does that. But the more important point is, why did this terrorist attack occur, even though these Western countries are spending so much on surveillance? And I think the answer is that if you focus on actual terrorists and surveil them, you can be successful in stopping attacks. But when you engage in mass surveillance, putting hundreds of millions of people under a surveillance microscope, it becomes extremely difficult to find the people who attacked the Boston Marathon or the people who attack Charlie Hebdo in Paris. And I think it's a failure of governments when they do even more mass surveillance in the wake of these attacks.
I think that's a good point, but I think what Greenwald's missing, besides the fact that the other guys arguing for the fascist state and saying the public wants that, but I think what Greenwald is missing is that he actually believes that these guys are just wrong-headed with this mass surveillance. He doesn't get the blackmail state aspect of it. Or he's never once mentioned that this is used for blackmail. That's what this surveillance is for.
Or he's subject to it. I've always thought he was subject to it.
Well, he definitely doesn't say anything new here. He's just philosophizing. So you might be right. Maybe he is a subject to the blackmail approach. It does work.